Hi, good afternoon. My name is Simone Marchesi, and I teach Dante at Princeton University. I am here with Max Matukhin, and we're gonna, who is studying in the Department of Comparative Literature at Princeton. Neither of us is actually in Princeton right now. I am in Italy on the coast of Tuscany, quarantining myself, isolating myself for a quarantine after having traveled from the US to Italy. And where are you, Max?
And well, I'm, as it turns out, on the exact same coast, except a little bit further north in Liguria, also quarantining myself after a bit of international travel, but well, here on the whole.
Wonderful. Okay, so we are going to talk about Paradiso 26, which is a canto we are both particularly interested in, and we'll talk in a moment about the reasons why we are interested in this canto. As a form of reminder, a refresher, Canto 26 is the last canto in which Dante, as a protagonist, is undergoing an examination on theological virtues, and he is being examined in 26 on the final culminating virtue, which is charity. And the bulk of the canto is devoted to Dante's answer to the question, what is charity, what is love, that is posed to him by John. And the second half of the canto, which is the half of the canto that we will be spending our time on, has to do with an additional character that gets introduced in the canto, and this character is Adam. Max and I agree that this is an important part of the poem. As you can see, as you can hear, we are recording this in English. Though we speak Italian to one another, it's too late for my English to get better. It's not too late for Max Italian to get better. And so we decided that Italian is the language that we speak. I had the opposite deal with my teacher at Princeton, with Bob Hollander, and so I spoke English with him for when I was in Max's shoes. So we, as cross-trained people, cross-trained in languages, we'd like to reflect together and have a conversation about the linguistic question that is broached by Dante within the meeting with Adam, the first soul.
And so I suppose one of the first questions that really needs to be answered is, why is this canto divided in this sort of very strange, very peculiar way into these two seemingly unrelated parts, the first being this interrogation on the theological virtue of charity, and the second being on the nature of language and how language develops historically. The two are seemingly unrelated, and yet Dante, for some reason, insists on integrating them into a single canto, effectively bisecting it, though the two parts are not equivalent. So why do you think that all of a sudden, after this sort of tripartite interrogation, which has been very much a sort of a single thematic whole, we have this coda on language all of a sudden with the unexpected introduction of a new character, who is Adam?
Yeah, you defined it very well. I think it is a coda. It is a coda, and I think it has something to do with a funny fact about the poem, that the coda of Cantos 26, of the co-numerary cantos in Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, of the old 26 cantos, have something to do with language, and surprisingly so, with multilingualism specifically. Inferno 26, we all remember, has, has from the start a multilingual dimension with Dante approaching, Dante, the Italian speaker, approaching Ulysses, the Greek speaker, through the mediation of Virgil, which is, of course, a cultural mediator, but is also a linguistic mediator. Now, that canto, at the end, in the part in which, let's say, in the moment of silence between Canto 26 and Canto 27, as Canto 27 will tell us, we'll also see Virgil switching codes and moving from whatever language he spoke to, we are to imagine he spoke to Ulysses, switching to his own native vernacular, which is a Lombard. It's a Lombard vernacular, as Guido da Montefeltro, the character starring in Canto 27, will report for us readers, to hear. Istra ten va, omai più non t'adizzo. This line is not neither in Latin for Dante nor in Greek for Ulysses, but in Virgil's own alleged vernacular. So there's something funny happening in the coda of 26 of Inferno, and there's something funny happening in the coda of 26 in Paradiso as well, with a linguistic question. Dante silently asks Adam, what is the nature of the language that he used and made. Purgatorio 26 as well has something remarkable from the linguistic point of view, the multilingual point of view, because you have Arnaud Daniel coming into the poem and speaking his own Languedoc, his own vernacular that Dante transcribes for us in the fiction of the poem as something completely transparent. So I think there is something to be said for the structural verticality of the theme of language being distributed in the codas of the Cantos 26.
And it may even be the case that the sort of two parts of Paradiso 26 are related after all, because there are references in the interrogation on charity to, of course, scripture as one of the factors that effectively works towards or promotes Dante's sense of caritas. And here we immediately have a connection with a form of language, as in the language of scripture, the language of the Vulgate, but scripture which is always, in a sense, being translated. And that brings us back to the question of Adam and of language, because we are dealing very much with the language of salvation and which language or what language is that could possibly be. And so just to develop this further, I wanted to read the specific passage that we were interested in. Comes at the end, as we mentioned, of Paradiso 26. It's about lines 124 through 132, and that's where Adam responds to Dante's question regarding the language that he originally spoke. And he says, I'll read it in the Italian, La lingua che io parlai fu tutta spenta innanzi che all'ovra inconsumabile fosse la gente di Nembrot attenta, che nullo effetto mai razionabile per lo piacere uman che rinovella, seguendo il cielo sempre fu durabile. Opera naturale è quam favella, ma così o così natura lascia poi farà voi secondo che va bella. And although this theory of human language as essentially changeable can seem very up-to-date and modern to us nowadays, it's quite interesting that there is in fact quite a radical change of opinion here between what Dante says in this passage and what he had written earlier in his linguistic treatise, which is the Vulgaria Eloquentia, where in fact he had argued that Adam had originally spoken Hebrew, and that God had effectively maintained that language, being the language of the chosen people, and that it had effectively remained intact since Adam's times. Here, all of a sudden, he completely changes tack and decides that no, after all, there is no single saved language, that all language is effectively mutable, and that even Adam's language is, right from the very beginning, subject to the mutation that all human endeavors are effectively subject to.
Yes, indeed, the distance is amazing. It's one of those cases in which Dante, silently and not completely silently revises his own stance on something essential here. Okay, on something really essential. Yes, indeed, and what's striking is that Dante has no qualms in evoking the central moments in linguistic history of mankind, in the linguistic history of mankind. So Adam being created with a language disposition and creating himself a language, fabricating himself a language in Eden. Let's remind ourselves that the canto has a lot to do with Eden here. The question that Dante asks around language is also framed in terms of how long did how much time did Adam spend in Eden once he was created? And the answer, as we know, is a puny 6 hours, basically, before being cast out for the original sin. Dante evokes both the central moments in linguistic history. One is creation of human beings in Eden with language and the creation of language. And then the traumatic moment of Babel, the construction of the tower under the instigation or upon the instigation of Nimrod. This is the obra inconsumabile that he talks about here. So he evokes the central moments, the central crisis of mankind's linguistic history, but gives a completely, that he had also treated in De Vulgari Eloquentia, but he gives completely different answers to the problems that they posed. In the De Vulgari, as Max reminded us, there was one way, there was one language that had been preserved untouched throughout history, untouched by Babel, and the language was Hebrew. Now, for Dante, that vernacular, that language is irrecoverable. I think Paradiso 26 makes even one step further. It's not just saying that that language is irrecoverable, but it's also in itself not sacred anymore. The other option that the linguistic treatise had fielded as a possibility to respond to the fragmentation and change, endemic change in human language, was the grammar, the artificial language that the inventors or constructors of grammar had devised to respond to multilingualism and change. And it's remarkable that grammar might have been what Inferno 26 was also discounting by having Virgil switch from an unspoken or an unsaid language to a decisively vernacular one. So these two options that in the Vulgari Eloquentia had been put forward as a possibility for a poet to write in a language that could endure throughout time and could be in a way universal, are replaced in the poem, and I would argue that they are replaced by something that's intimated in 26 of Purgatory, by translatability, by translation, by a courageous, a bold statement that all vernaculars can and should be translated from one to the other. So I think that the distance from what Dante had imagined as a viable option for a poet in the Vulgari, and what he practices in the Commedia is immense. It's really immense.
And one thing that we have to, in a sense, ask ourselves in view of this sudden change of heart is, what are the implications specifically for a poem that a canto earlier calls itself sacred? If we have this earlier evocation of scripture which is always translated in a certain sense, and we have this evocation of a poem which is meant to be salvific, but at the same time, Dante discounts the nature of a divine language that could be spoken by mankind. Speech in itself is essential. It is given directly by God, but language itself is purely contingent. And there is the question of how does this strictly contingent instrument, if you like, allow mankind to then access what is eternal? And the answer must, in a certain sense, be precisely what Simone mentioned, which is that it is no longer that there is a single sacred language which gives access to the divine, but it is in fact precisely this notion of translatability, of a sacred poem which makes itself understandable, which sees language as effectively transparent and going across linguistic boundaries, that allows for Dante to effectively write a poem that is sacred and that, according to him, can be salvific.
Yeah. Dante, in a way, what Dante is doing resonates with Benjamin's idea that the language of truth is the language of translation, that in translation all languages display their innermost desire, that is the desire to communicate, and in this common desire, they actually become transparent to one another. Max, I think we are running out of time here. I enjoy very much, talking to you and discussing these things, and I hope we'll be doing more of this soon enough and in person. A good friend of mine has adopted as a title for his book about the quarantine that he spent in Italy in isolation as well, an adaptation of the last line of the poem, e quindi uscimmo of the Inferno, e quindi uscimmo e riveder la gente. So, and finally we will leave our homes and see people again, not le stelle, not the stars that Dante sees at the end of Inferno, but people. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening.
Thank you all, and thank you very much to the organizers for sort of putting all these conversations together, which are a true pleasure, especially in this time when we don't really have the chance to have them in person, but at least we can share them all the more widely. Thank you again.
Wonderful. See you soon.